This reminds everybody of what they cannot stand about Washington. Scoring points against each other, poking at each other, and telling each other that you're my plan, your plan. Look, we all
that's
have
called a Democratic
visions.
The immutable law of presidential campaign debates is the more you know about government and policy, the less satisfying the debate is. Many of the lines that get the biggest reaction in presidential debates are declarations of hope on matters that are completely under the control of Congress. The most stirring line in last night's debate was one of those.
And in Odessa, I met the mother of a 15-year-old girl who was shot by an AR-15. And that mother watched her bleed to death over the course of an hour because so many other people were shot by that AR-15 in Odessa and Midland. There weren't enough ambulances to get to them in time. Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
As usual, the health care section of the debate was the longest and most contentious part of the debate, as it veered out of control with confusing policy points and interruptions and insults. Senator Kamala Harris said the most important thing that voters have to know about health care policy right now in America.
Everybody on this stage, I do believe, is well-intentioned and wants that all Americans have coverage and recognizes that right now 30 million Americans don't have coverage. But at least 5 people have talked, some repeatedly, on this subject, and not once have we talked about Donald Trump. So let's talk about the fact that Donald Trump came into office and spent almost the entire first year of his term trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. We all fought against it, and then the late, great John McCain, at that moment at about 2 o'clock in the morning, killed his attempt to take health care from millions of people in this country. Fast forward to today, and what is happening? Donald Trump's Department of Justice is trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Donald Trump's administration is trying to get rid of the ban that we placed on denying people who have pre-existing conditions coverage. Donald Trump is trying to say that our kids up to the age of 26 can no longer be on our plans. And frankly, I think this discussion has given the American public a headache. What they want to know is that they're going to have health care and cost will not be a barrier to getting it. But let's focus on the end goal. If we don't get Donald Trump out of office, he's going to get rid of all of it.
George, 15 seconds. 15 seconds.
And yes, a Republican senator, John McCain, got applause right there in the middle of the Democrats' health care debate. You can ignore everything else that the candidates say about health care policy in the debates because everything else they say is entirely under the control of Congress. And as president, each one of them will sign whatever Democrats in Congress manage to pass. In 2008, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama argued endlessly about health care policy. The chief difference being Hillary Clinton was in favor of an individual mandate and Barack Obama was opposed to it. And in the end, President Obama signed the Affordable Care Act with an individual mandate, thereby proving that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton's disagreements about health care were completely ignorable. Each of them was going to sign whatever version Congress managed to pass. No one on that stage last night knows what Congress is capable of passing on health care. And the moderators didn't ask a question about health care that is within the powers of the presidency. The only power the president has in relation to legislation is to sign or veto it. And so the relevant question, which could really shorten the health care section of the debate, you could do it with one of those quick show of hands moments. You could ask for a show of hands on the question of, will you sign whatever health care bill a Democratic House and Democratic Senate manages to pass? And the real answer is every one of them will sign whatever a Democratic Congress can pass. If that's Medicare for all, Joe Biden's going to sign it. If it's strengthening the Affordable Care Act, President Bernie Sanders is going to sign it. Here is the right way to ask a presidential candidate a question.
There's been the debate around reparations for descendants of African slaves. If you are elected president, Sheila Jackson Lee, a member of Congress, has a bill calling for a commission to study reparations. If that bill were to pass and come to your desk, would you sign it?
If the House and Senate pass that bill, of course I would sign it.
If the House and Senate pass that bill, of course I would sign it. What other answer is there? Al Sharpton's question forced one of those rare moments in a presidential campaign, a candidate admitting that legislating is really all up to the House and Senate. Here is a sample of the candidates remembering who they are really running against.
You know, when I first got into this race, I remember President Trump scoffed and said he'd like to see me making a deal with Xi Jinping. I'd like to see him making a deal with Xi Jinping.
We have a guy there that is literally running our country like a game show.
We have a white supremacist in the White House, and he poses a mortal threat to people of color all across this country.
We must and will defeat Trump, the most dangerous president in the history of this country.
There's enormous opportunities once we get rid of Donald Trump.
And now, President Trump, you can go back to watching Fox News.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.